Hey everybody, this video is going to be about quadratic equations and more specifically how to solve those quadratic equations by factoring. So there are different ways to solve quadratic equations. You can factor it, you can use a table, you can graph it, you can complete the square, you can use quadratic formula. But this particular video is going to be simply focusing on factoring. But first, I want to talk about the solutions that we're finding. So whenever the graph of a function intersects the x-axis, so anytime that it intersects this x-axis here that I'm highlighting, whenever it intersects that x-axis, the y value is 0. For any point that's on that x-axis, y value is 0. So a value for x where that y value is 0, where that f of x is 0, is a 0 of the function. In other words, that is where, in this case, this graph goes from a negative area to a positive y value. That means it's going to cross the x-axis. That creates a 0. If I follow this parabola around, I'm in a positive y value, and then it crosses the x-axis and the graph goes down to a negative y value. This, where it crosses the x-axis, is a 0 of the function. That means whenever you plug in that x equals whatever it is into your quadratic function, you're going to get an answer of 0. So to find the zeros of a quadratic function, I have to substitute in to our standard form of y equals ax squared plus bx plus c, 0 for y. So we're going to solve this 0 equals ax squared plus bx plus c. Now to solve a quadratic equation in standard form by factoring, we're going to factor it, and then we're going to use our zero product property. And what that property says is if I have two things, A and B, and if I multiply those together, it's going to equal 0. So that means that either A is 0 or B is 0. So let's think about that. So let's just say A is 0. I plug that in. 0 times B, does that equal 0? Well, yeah, it does. And if B equals 0, let's see, A times 0 equals 0. Well, yes, that's true. So what you're trying to find are the values that would make the expression 0. And we're going to do that by factoring. So here's your first example. We're going to solve by factoring. Those would be kind of your directions that would go along with it. Because if it would just say solve, then I can use whatever method I prefer to solve it. Today, we're factoring. So if I have x squared minus 7x equals negative 12. Well, here's the deal. I want to know when the y values are 0. So that means I need to set the equation equal to 0. So x squared minus 7x, I'm going to add 12 to both sides. It equals 0. So in other words, I'm going to put my little steps out here. Set it equal to 0. In other words, let's see here. Get equation in standard form. Standard form. Okay? After that, we're going to factor. So I'm looking for two numbers that when I multiply them, I'm getting a positive 12. And when I add them, I get a negative 7. So let's talk numbers that multiply to get a positive 12. Either say 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. Or I could have a negative 1, negative 12, negative 2, negative 6, negative 3, negative 4. Those are all my options. Out of those options, which one adds to negative 7, negative 3, and negative 4. So I'm going to factor, find my linear factors, and one of them is x minus 3, and the other is x minus 4. So one way to check to make sure that I factor correctly is to go ahead and FOIL, multiply this out, use those distributive properties, and see if I get the what I started with. And I would. So let's continue using that zero product property. So after I factor, I'm going to use the zero product property. In other words, that says either this first linear factor, x minus 3, can be 0, or the second linear factor, x minus 4, can be 0. Well, now I'm going to just solve each for x. So that means x is 3 or x is 4. So bottom line, what I would expect the graph to look like: it's going to cross the x-axis at 3. It's going to cross the x-axis at 4. What I do know is that the a value is 1. That means it's positive. So my parabola is going to open up. So that is just a quick sketch as to how we would find the solutions and where the graph crosses the x-axis. Okay, let's do one more example. So again, solving by factoring. Solve by factoring. And the equation is 5x squared plus x equals 4. All right, same algorithm that we used before, same method, same process. Set it equals 0. 5x squared plus x minus 4 equals 0. I'm going to go ahead and slide divide bottoms up on this one, all right, as my factor method. Slide, divide, bottoms up. And I'll show you how to do that. So the only time that I'm going to use this slide, divide, bottoms up is when I have a coefficient out in front, the coefficient of that x squared that is something other than 1. So slide. What happens is I take that coefficient and I slide it, and I'm multiplying the a times the c. So that gives me x squared plus x minus 20. Now I need two numbers that are going to multiply to give me a negative 20, add to give me a positive 1. So let's see. My numbers would be, what? See, 1 and 20, 2 and 10, 3 doesn't go, 4 and 5. One of them has to be negative. So I'm going to write out just all my options. Now, which one adds to get a positive 1? The negative 4 and the 5. Write your linear factors. X minus 4, x plus 5. And that equals 0. Okay, that's the slide portion. I'm going to divide. You divide by what you slid. I slid the 5. I'm going to divide each by 5. After that, I'm going to simplify. So I'm going to put under this divide, simplify. Always simplify your fractions. X minus 4/5, x plus 1 equals 0. Bottoms up, 5 goes in front of the x. 5x minus 4, x plus 1 equals 0. Now you could also factor by grouping. You would end up with these same linear factors. So now I'm going to use my zero product property that 5x minus 4 equals 0 or x plus 1 equals 0. Solve 5x equals 4 by adding 4 to both sides. Divide by 5. I get 4/5, or I get negative 1. There are my two solutions, what I would expect the graph to look like. 4/5, let's see, that's what, 0.8, 8/10, and then negative 1. I see that my a value is positive, so I expect this to open up. And that gives me a quick sketch of what that graph might look like. All right, I think that's going to be it for this video. I'm going to do a 4-5 part 2 video, and that's going to show you how to do the calculator portions.